So what do we do? Well, let's go find a foreclosure to buy. Like, we didn't realize they were starting to become a dime a dozen.
Right.
We just knew when we got our first one, it was like, man, this is cool. You could buy a house for 55 grand. How cool is that? Meanwhile, the world's melting down, but we didn't understand.
Welcome to the Ascend Your Success podcast. Whether you're just starting out or are a veteran looking to grow your business, you're in the right place. Join us to learn how to achieve financial freedom while working and living life on your own terms. Hear valuable insights, strategies, and interviews with successful entrepreneurs. Get ready to achieve the success you've always dreamed of. Ready? Let's go.
What's going on, guys? My name is Wyatt Reed, and this is the Ascend Your Success podcast. And today I get to interview my friend Frank Iglesias. Man, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You've done a little bit of everything, it seems like. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in real estate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wyatt. I appreciate it. I started, we're going 15 plus years now, so it's been a minute. And yeah, we've done a lot. We've done, in the early days, it was buy, fix, and hold. We got heavy into wholesaling. We did some flips. We graduate, if I use stereotypical terms, we graduated to larger rehabs, which then became a lot of new construction. And we've always done some rentals here and there along the way. We've done the creative strategies as well, right? Your lease option, owner finance, sub two. But then after doing the new build for several years, we liked it, but we also learned that that's really a very environmental type thing. Meaning there's some places where it's nice to do it, and there's some places where like, no, it's not worth the effort. And because, they're long projects, there's a lot of things that are quite frankly outside of your control no matter what you do. And we've been looking to get back to basics and just do easy deals that we can get in and out of quickly, make money, move on to the next one, and serve people. Because the thing with new construction is, you could work a year on a project before it even goes on the market, and then you don't know how long it's going to take. Of course, inflation's up, costs have gone up and so forth. So what you thought it was going to be has changed quite a bit. And we realized we had pre-sold a couple of houses, and one of the things we really liked was working with the homeowner. Which is that, a lot of builders are like, they don't even know who the homeowner is, right? We actually enjoyed it because it gave the project a bit more meaning. You're having a conversation with somebody through the length of the project. And I know people fear that. We actually found it good because there's just something inherently nice about knowing, hey, this is something that's not only it's serving them, but you get to see it.
Yeah.
And so having done all these different facets of real estate, I realized the part we really enjoy is the people part. And so we got to thinking, well, what's the part where we can do that the fastest? And I was like, well, let's go back to simple wholesale. So people are like, I want to grow up and flip and build houses. And we're like, I want to grow up and just wholesale again. Been there, done that. And nothing wrong with it if that's your passion. But we realize real estate is maybe not our biggest passion, not compared to, helping people.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I see, especially in ourselves, like we done the same thing. We had the same situation. We started flipping, started buying more and more, and we were doing 4, 5, 6 flips at a time. And it was the worst time of my life. I was unhealthy. I was fat. I was having problems at home. I was always on edge. And I just realized that, I don't know if everybody thinks that when you start your own business and you're doing real estate that you're supposed to be in love with it, but I absolutely hated it at that point. And I was like, I got to figure out a way to get back to, family, being healthy, still making money, but doing what I enjoy doing, right? And so that's when we pulled back and we started doing the seller financing. So we're still doing wholesaling as well. And I've got 2 flips that are on the market. So it's hard to pass up on flips. I always say, I'm not going to do another flip this year. And then something will poke its head in and I'll be like, well, might as well do it.
Right. And that was something else that really hit us. I guess it was a couple of years ago. I mean, it might be 3 years ago now. It was a while back. We ended up falling into this flip deal that was literally 2.5 weeks away. Literally, that's how long it took. It ended up being 3.5 weeks, but it was because one cabinet was delayed a week. But in actual work, it was literally 2.5 weeks of work. We sold that property off Facebook to an investor, and he got conventional financing, so there was no 90-day seasoning thing. And we made like 35 grand. And it was like the easiest deal. And so when we did it, and we were still busy doing big deals, and I sat there and I thought to myself, wait a minute. We just did this simple little flip that made 35 grand. The effort level was maybe 2% of a large rehab or new build. And, you know, people always say with these big projects, you can make bigger checks. It's like, well, that's true sometimes, but there's also a lot more variables, things that throw off the timeline and so forth. And what if you could make that bigger check, but how about take the bigger chunk of time and apply it to getting better at chasing down the small deals? Because even if you chase the small deals, there's still less work than building one house.
You've done so much. You've done the flipping. You've done the construction. You're transitioning back to wholesaling, things like that. So let's take a step back to the very beginning. Was it always the goal to get into construction or get into flipping, or what? Like pre-real estate, Frank? Like what was happening in your mind? Like what were you wanting?
No, the goal was never construction per se. You know, new construction was not something that ever crossed my mind. We sort of fell into that almost by accident, and then we got seduced by the dark side of the force. But now, in all seriousness, when we got into it, the idea, like everyone else, financial freedom, I was introduced to real estate. I got the email. Still don't remember who sent it, but for a rich dad, poor dad seminar.
Mm-hmm.
One of the initial 2-3 hour things. And I went, and of course, like everyone who's new to this, your eyes go, woo, right? Like we know the drill, which, you know, this is 2008, right? So that led to the 3-day.
You got sucked into it.
And which then led to us buying classes. Mm-hmm. Yes, we were literally getting into classes when the market was starting to collapse, but we didn't really know. Like, I'm just working a full-time job, so didn't really understand that the real estate world was starting to blow up. Just, you know, had no idea. And so one of the classes we bought was a foreclosure class. So what do? Well, let's go find a foreclosure to buy. Like, we didn't realize they were starting to become a dime a dozen.
Right.
We just knew when we got our first one, it was like, man, this is cool. You could buy a house for 55 grand. How cool is that? Meanwhile, the world's melting down, but we didn't understand. We were as green as, you know, the t-shirt, right? So, I'm sorry, polo shirt. Anyway, we bought that first house. We fixed it up. It was a little bit of a rocky road to rehab because when we closed our first refinance, I'll never forget, we went to the closing, and back then you still had this idea of wholesale lending in the conventional space.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a company out of Florida. I think it was Ocala, if I remember correctly. Well, anyway, the day before we closed, apparently the Fed had shut down the FHA division. Wow. But they're like, you're good, Frank. Conventional's still good. So, okay, great. Like, not that I really understood that, but I go over to sign docs, which I did. I closed it. I think it was a Wednesday afternoon, if memory serves me right, but it was late. It was at the end of the day, whatever day it was, and we're done. I walk out with my first refinance closing package. All right. And I guess it was the following day that I got a message or a call or whatever it was, and they said, yeah, this is not funding because apparently the Fed had now shut down the conventional division. And I'm using the word division, department, whatever it was in the lender, right? And that deal and I was told that my loan was in the queue to fund, and it just never happened. And so I remember asking the closing attorney, like, what do we do? And they're like, well, you could sue the federal government. Yeah, because I'm probably not high on that priority list for a small loan, which then led to us and it took months to find someone else to close that. But that was literally how we got our first rental. Was we bought it, small hard money loan, and it was crazy. But back in those days, we just, I was working a full-time job. It's like, well, if there's some bumps along the way to financial freedom, that's okay, right? Like, it's okay. Like, we didn't sign up. To be fair to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, they never made it sound like this was like, all roses and tulips and all that. Like, we never got that from them. It was good, legitimate education. You're going to have to work hard. And so, there was we didn't get like red flags from it or anything like that. And, but that was always the goal. And unfortunately, and I don't say it's unfortunate because I'm a man of faith. So I believe everything happens for a reason and nothing's by accident, even if it makes absolutely no sense. But, fast forward several years, when we got into new construction, we kind of got off our calling. And after, it was good, it was sexy, but there was actually a little bit of truth when I say we were seduced by the dark side of the force. And I don't know the answer to why yet, and I'm okay with that. I don't have to know why. That will become clear in due time. But I realized after doing that for several years, hey, we didn't get into investing to become a builder. I could build a house in my sleep. I've got the process down. We've done it enough times. But I realized this isn't what we were meant to do. But the reason I share is I share with people, when you go to these seminars or classes or whoever, and they're fine, right? There's good information. Whoever you go to, the information's usually good, but they're selling you the dream, right? And we get that. It's sales. Like, no one's going to fault anyone in the United States for selling a dream. That's part of the sales pitch. We get it. But when I coach people, I tell people, let's make sure that what you're actually after, you pick a path in real estate that lines up with that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people I've met, and I mean a lot of people I've met that have gotten into flipping that hate it. Like you were saying, it was like they do it and they're like, I hate this.
Yeah.
They hate it because it's not in alignment. And so the story I always share is back during COVID. We were all on Clubhouse, if you remember. Good old Clubhouse.
I do.
Clubhouse was fun times. And we were in one of these real estate rooms, and there was this lady who comes in. I want the buzzwords: financial freedom, generational wealth, whatever that means, yada, yada. Okay, great. And her plan was she wanted to get into new construction to build short-term rentals. And we said, have you ever done a deal? No. Have you ever been involved with either of these career paths? No. And I'm like, so what you haven't been told yet is these are two completely full-time career paths that you want to do together, fulfill generational wealth. And so we dived into what she really wanted. All she really wanted was enough passive income to pay the bills and visit her family. That's it.
Right.
So it was like, why don't we work on a side of real estate where you get good at acquisitions to acquire properties that develop cash flow? You don't need to touch new construction. Airbnb is a full-time gig to really blow it out. I mean, it's great, but it takes work. It takes effort. You don't just wake up one day and it's all automated beautifully. Like, there's a lot of work to get to that point.
Yeah.
And so I learned back then, I was like, all right, when we coach people, step one, what do you really want? And let's work on the vehicle of real, because there's a lot of vehicles, right, in real estate. Let's work on the vehicle of real estate that's in alignment with what you actually want.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because there's a solution for you.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I think we're just wired like that. And I believe, once you figure out how to tame that, that's a superpower, Like when I first got started, I wanted to just do rental properties. I didn't want to do wholesaling because I thought wholesaling was sketchy, right? I didn't know what I didn't know. And then I got around people doing bigger things than me. And I was like, okay, well, it's not really wholesaling. You're a well-rounded investor who knows how to use multiple exit strategies. Well, now I want to do this. Now I want to do that. And it wasn't until I met my business partner who was more grounded, who's more, hey, let's do one thing, let's do it good, and then let's move on to the next thing. Until that's when I got pulled back, and it's like, I'm never going to be successful if I don't focus on one avenue and make sure I'm good at it, right? There's no issue at all with you being well-rounded. And that's one thing that I tell my students all the time. Like, I want you to be able to make multiple offers. I want you to know how to utilize different strategies, but come in with an open mind that, we're going to do what makes the most sense, but it's going to align with your vision. Cause we do the same thing. We have vision documents. We, go through a very extensive, like, what do you truly want? And give me reasons why you want this, right? Let's not just be surface level with this, right? So I agree 100%. Looking back, when you first got started versus what you're doing now, because one of the most commonly asked questions is, how do I get leads, right? So where you started versus where you are now, what does that look like as far as lead generation?
Well, it's a different world. When I started, you fell out of your bed and there was 30 leads in your inbox on the MLS, right? You didn't have to work hard to learn how to market, which was, if you started in those years, 2008 to 2012, 13-ish, it was really it was great because it was easy, but at the same time, it painted a false picture. Because you didn't really have to know how to market. Everything was on the MLS. I remember going to my first wholesale class, and it was like, why would I, we did put all this work in, but I got 30 MLS leads, that are, properties in the toilet that I could go flip. Like, why would I work this hard? So it was kind of deceiving, but we didn't know we didn't know. And then the other thing we found really valuable was networking. Like, networking for leads was always a good avenue for us, but it was time intensive. That's the downside of network. It's time intensive. You don't know if it's going to work. I mean, you don't really know if anyone's going to work, but you're dealing with other people. And so it could be very inconsistent, but when it did work, it was great. So it was very positive. So we did it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, networking still works. And I think in today's digital world, relationship has never been more valuable because we've gotten so used to our devices. It's like, I just want to hear a human being's voice, right? Can we just talk?
Right.
And, and so I think we're going to see more of that. And you hear that more these days, relationship. Because at the end of the day, humans are still humans. But we've also learned is we have to shift how we generate leads. Is the MLS still there? Sure. Do we look at it much? Not too often, every now and then. But the reality is today's market is not very MLS friendly overall. Yeah, someone's going to say, I do all my deals off the MLS. God bless you. That's great. And there's probably markets where that does work great. My market, not so much. Not today. Tomorrow might be different, right? So I recognize that. So we never rule it out completely, but it has its season. And we're learning that regardless of what method we use, and we cold call and we do the texting like anybody else, but what we've learned is it's really about, again, going back to this idea of people. Every seller's probably been called 20 times at minimum, maybe daily, who knows. Direct mail is still not common. We know that. We know that very few people are still getting direct mail. So that's something we may explore more. Sellers are smarter now. They're savvier. Zillow is the authority, right or wrong. It's an authority in their eyes. If Zillow says their house is worth 300 and the MLS says 200, you don't have to work hard to convince them the 300 is wrong.
Right.
So education-based selling, very much a part of it. So, sellers just have a lot more information. They're sharper. They hear what's happening on the news. They hear what's happening about interest rates. So I've seen that regardless of whatever method we use, some patience is involved, really working with sellers. So we don't go into things. I mean, yeah, you go into expecting to get the deal, but realistically, the old sales adage is true. It's probably going to take you 5 to 12 touches. I just heard yesterday 16 touches.
Oh, wow.
So imagine you got to touch a seller 5 to 16 times to get a deal.
Yeah.
If you get one in less than 5, God bless you. That's wonderful, right? But don't be shocked when it doesn't happen. it's almost like you have to prove you're real. Because a lot of sellers, let's be real, they've probably heard from other investors. Shoot, they've probably been under contract with other investors.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it didn't work out because they offered too much.
Yeah. I think it's so important to, and this is something that I teach as well, is that put the money aside and try to figure out a win-win situation with these people. You know, obviously we're in this to make money. Obviously that's what we're here to do. But if you go at it as a someone who's trying to create a win-win situation with someone who may have some type of issues going on, pre-foreclosure, probate, these different types of motivation, like find a win-win situation for them. It's so much more important. It's building that relationship that you were talking about. Hey, talk to me like I'm a human being. Don't just read this script and sound like a dang robot,
Uh-huh.
So that's the way we look at it, is trying to find a win-win situation.
Well, and you can't overdo it. So like I was talking to one of my assistant who's cold calling today.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, have you ever worked in a call center? And they were like, yeah. I said, and you had a script? And yeah, you have a script. Okay. This is going to sound a little different. And I told them this, and they sort of laughed because it was like, whoa, because they're new to our team. And I said, so on a lot of your scripts, when you get somebody on the phone, you'll ask them a question. Okay, so the agent is calling, in our case, the seller, and asks them a question. And then, so maybe it's like, how many bedrooms? Oh, 3 bedrooms. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, fine. How many bathrooms? 2 times. Oh, thank you so much. So after every detail, it's like, I said, this might surprise you, but on this side of the pond, if you're overly thankful for everything they say, that's just as annoying.
Yeah.
Because it's not normal. Like, do you go to your friends and say, thank you so much after every sentence they say?
Yeah, I love it. I love that for sure. Well, we're kind of coming up on time. Most of the people who are listening to this right now are beginners looking to figure out how to get into real estate. And I really like how you said you started off with free lead sources, because that's one thing that I push so much nowadays is building relationships with wholesalers, like free lead sources. There are so many different ways you can get a deal for free just by utilizing network and who and going to events and everything like that. I got my first 5 houses from wholesalers, right? So what advice can you give these guys that are just looking to get into real estate, looking to get started? Like, if you could go back knowing what you know now and talk to your former self, what would be some good advice that you would be giving?
First piece of advice, have a quality coach day one.
Mm.
You're going into business, and just like professional sports, business is professional. The problem with real estate, in particular in the residential space, is it's too much of a wild, wild west, and you have too many people running around without coaches, and it's causing all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
And now you have laws being taught, you hear about the laws banning wholesaling and this. And then the agents are like, well, I've seen agents just as bad. So it doesn't really matter. What matters is having that coach to walk you through the steps. There was 3 years in our career where we didn't have a coach of any kind. And that's when all the mistakes happened. Epic mistakes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the problem with the real estate game is because real estate's a slow-moving vehicle, you can make a mistake and not know it for 6, 12, 18, 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
So just as you don't see a problem today, just hang on a little while. It might bite you a little later. We have firsthand experience with this.
Right.
So I tell people, you need that coach they've seen the mountaintop, but they've also seen the valley. They're a wealth of experience, and there's no dollar amount they will charge you that will be worth the savings they're going to net you.
I agree.
So I tell people, if you're going to do real estate, get a coach. If you can't afford one, come up with something creative. In fact, that's your first assignment. Come up with a resourceful way other than promise I'm going to. You haven't.
Right.
So we need to come up with a resourceful solution, make something happen, because having that coach will pay for itself multiple times over. So I think that's the first thing. And the other thing I would say is be willing to be more resourceful than you even knew was possible. Real estate's a full contact sport, is what I always say. And Tony Robbins gave this cool thing on a TED Talk, and I don't remember the exact words now. But the gist of it was, we never have a resource issue. It's always a resourcefulness issue. And that's hard because being really resourceful will challenge you. There's going to be multiple times where you're like, I have no idea how I'm going to solve this problem. And you probably don't know it in that moment, but as long as you're willing to not quit and keep going, somehow, some way, however long it takes, you will figure it out. So just be willing to commit day one to being resourceful. Because a lot of the people I've seen that don't last, they didn't get that memo.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
thought it was going to be easy, and it's like, if you're looking for easy, real estate is not for you. There is no easy in this business.
Yeah, I mean, two things to add on to that is, number one, and I know everybody listening is going to say, well, he says this every single time, but it is so true. Every time anybody says this, I tell them, we're not telling you to do anything we're not doing. We've got mentors. I've got a mentor. I'm sure you've got mentors. We've had several mentors, right? So we're not telling you guys to do anything that we're not doing ourselves, right? You've got to have a mentor that's been there, done it, and is going to watch your back. You're still going to have problems going into the second one. You're going to always have problems. Like, you're not, if it was easy, everybody'd be rich and we'd all be entrepreneurs. We all own our own businesses and nobody'd be running McDonald's, right? But you've got to be able to solve the problems and continue to move forward, because after you solve that problem, the next one's going to be right behind you with a boxing glove ready to punch you in the face. You got to continue to solve problems probably for the rest of your life, right? So that's great advice. I love it. I hear it all the time. So you know it's true because you hear it from so many people. Frank, thank you so much for being on here. How can people get a hold of you, work with you? How can we connect with you?
A number of ways. My website, frankiglesias.com. You can reach out to me there. I'm on all the social medias. I'm not hard to find, easy to find. So take your pick. I'm on all of them. But also, I always tell people, just call our office and actually leave a voicemail. Just very few people call, leave a voicemail, or even text for that matter. And I'm like, just call. Like, we'll actually answer. And if we don't and you leave a voicemail, we'll call back. But our number is 678-408-2228. So between our website, social, the phone, yeah, we're not hard to find. Happy to talk to people. And I do offer, if someone wants to talk about whatever we talked about today or anything, I do offer one free 15-minute chat about anything. Talk about anything. Got a problem? Call me and we'll talk about it. So.
I love it. That's awesome. We'll plug everything you got in the show notes and the comments and everything when we post, and we'll when we cut them up into reels, we'll tag you in all of them and everything like that. But man, I really appreciate you being on. Listen, guys, if you heard anything that you were like, man, I would love to get some more information about that, or I'd love to talk to somebody about real estate, do the things that these guys are doing, hit up Frank or go to ascendyoursuccess.com and you can talk to me too. And similar to Frank, I'll go through those applications and then I'll call you. We'll have a one-on-one conversation back to that relationship building, right? You're not going to get a VA or anything like that. Whether you're in or out, we'll see you next time.